Battlefield 6 officially got revealed, and we got a trailer that showcased a lot of what people know this franchise for: destruction and combined arms combat. It is all in-engine footage, so keep that in mind. I'll have gameplay of that for you from the event next week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that when it goes live. The trailer we got is well polished, it's full of action, and it's edited to the song Masters of War by Bob Dylan, perhaps giving us an insight into what the campaign is going to be about. A war is going to happen, but it probably isn't necessary. Let's break the trailer down, pick out some details that you might have missed. We'll start things off with the speech from the President of the United States. He's talking about the Pax Armata threat, but what you can see on his hands are a series of cuts or marks. Now, in the teaser that was released a few days back, it was mentioned that the Secretary General of NATO was assassinated, and so perhaps pure speculation here, there was a similar attempt on the life of the President of the United States. With the US being the most powerful country in the NATO alliance, it probably makes sense that the enemy force would want to try and weaken them. This is kind of the setup for the whole story of Battlefield 6. The next shot shows countless soldiers running through the streets of New York whilst missiles strike the Brooklyn Bridge. But amongst those soldiers are police officers as well. Again, in the teaser released a few days ago, one of the news taglines mentions Pax Armata sleeper cells being discovered on American soil. So that gives us a sense of the scale of this Pax operation and perhaps how unprepared the United States was for an attack that is now happening at this moment. The missile that strikes the Brooklyn Bridge shows off some massive destruction, something the Battlefield is famously known for, but at this point it's hard to say if this sort of destruction is going to transfer into the multiplayer a la Levolution from previous titles. Those set-piece destruction moments were always pretty cool. I think everyone remembers the skyscraper collapsing on Siege of Shanghai and Battlefield 4, but their impressiveness kind of wanes after you've seen it happen a few times, because the set piece happens the same every single time. Now, in a single player, they obviously have their home set pieces are pretty cool, but in multiplayer, I'm not so sure. Next, we get to take a very quick look at a main character in the game. Right now, we don't have any details on this person, but he appears a couple of times in the trailer alongside another, likely depicting two main characters on either side of the conflict, one for NATO and one for Pax Armata. You'll see those two characters are intrinsically linked, I think, and I'll explain how later in the video. In this next shot here, we see a group of soldiers gathered around the table, with one of them clearly upset about something. Maybe he needs a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. The soldier on the left is holding an M4 carbine with a holographic sight equipped, and you'll see that his clothing is something of a ghillie suit, but it's like the ghillie has had a haircut. We've got these short strips of fabric adorning his upper body and his helmet. Now, remember this character because he appears again later in the trailer. Throughout all the different scenes, actually, you're going to see lots of different unnamed soldiers, and all of them follow this same gritty, militaristic silhouette when it comes to their outfits. So I'm glad the developers know currently what FPS fans are clamoring for. There's no Ninja Turtles or Beavis and Buttheads in this trailer. I can assure you of that. In the background of this shot, we have two UH-60 helicopters colliding together, seemingly a surprise, the soldier in the foreground, but crashing choppers is definitely a theme for this entire trailer. It's almost as if the trailer team asked the devs how many crashes they wanted shown in the trailer, and the response was simply, yes. This next scene I actually really like. It's clearly an important part of the single-player campaign, infiltrating an apartment building, presumably in Brooklyn by the looks of the windows and the general layout. We get a really good look at the weapons that each soldier is holding. Here we've got an MPX affixed with some sort of hollow sight, a laser and a suppressor. What looks like another SMG in the hands of this soldier here, maybe an MP5 or some derivative. Then we've got a UMP in the hands of our buzz-cut ghillie soldier from earlier. And then the best look of the lot, I think this is the HK433. But it gives us a really good look at some of the attachments and the general finish of the weapons in this game. And you can see this weapon has an angled foregrip, it's got a close-range scope, a laser sight, and a flashlight attached to it. And maybe that's giving us a bit more of an understanding of the attachment system or the gunsmith system in this game. This infiltration scene might well have something to do with Pax Armata cells being discovered inside of Brooklyn, but all that becomes a side note when an Apache helicopter smashes into the building, giving us another great look at the destruction systems. in Battlefield 6. Next, we see the Manhattan Bridge being struck by either a missile or a plane. I can't tell which. The object just moves far too fast, and the motion blur on the trailer makes it difficult for you to know what it actually is. But this does somewhat confirm the previous infiltration scene taking place in Brooklyn, because the angle of the shot is taken from what would be one of the many apartment buildings that line the famous street that overlooks the bridge. And then we move right into one of the coolest shots of the trailer, a true Battlefield moment, the remnants of an Apache sticking out of the building. On the left, a tank rolling down the street and rolling over the top of an iconic New York taxi, and another attack helicopter flying down the street as everything explodes around it. Truly an awesome showcase of the set pieces from the single player. Now we're moving on to the Pax Armata faction with what looks like an amassing of soldiers on an airfield. Maybe it's the NATO airfield in Georgia that was attacked by Pax that was mentioned in the teaser the other day. Or maybe this is Tajikistan, a location that's been leaked as part of Battlefield 6. A Pax soldier in the foreground is wielding an ace weapon. I'm not sure which one, unfortunately, but it's affixed with a powered scope and a stubby underbarrel foregrip. And the soldier is adorned in darker clothing and has some sort of bead bracelet on his left wrist. From the limited information we have, Pax Armata is a newly formed alliance, or at least it's getting bigger as time goes on in Battlefield 6, and it may well have been recruiting fighters from all over the world, so this bracelet may well be a nod to that. The soldier in the background, who moves to the instruction of the foreground soldier, is holding an RPK with a large drum magazine and a fixed bipod, and then further in the background of the shot we have Chinook helicopter spinning up, ready to depart. This next shot throws into doubt my previous statement that this airfield could be in Georgia. It looks more likely to be Tajikistan, I think, looking at the general background setting, but we've got hundreds of soldiers here all moving off towards transport for battle, and several of them are holding weapons that we've not seen so far. Several of them have got G36s. One of the soldiers might well be holding an F2000, but again, not 100% sure. There's definitely a few M40 marksman rifles in there, and there's also an LMG. It could be a PKM, or maybe it's the Ultimax 100. It's hard to tell, with the silhouettes of the soldiers not being particularly defined, but you can definitely see they are weapons that are not in the rest of the trailer. Then we get some quick-fire shots here of what are presumably NATO soldiers then readying themselves for battle against Pax Armata, and I think we can be confident of that due to the weapons they're holding. The first soldier is thrown an M4 carbine affixed with a scope, laser, flashlight and suppressor. Then there's the M60 LMG with a powered scope, and then I've got to be honest, an unknown model of sniper rifle, because the shot is framed in such a way that it's hard to get a proper look. But again, notice our Buzz Cut Gilly character being the one holding the sniper rifle. He's back again. Here we move into some of the vehicle shots in the trailer. We've got an F-16 taking off from an aircraft carrier. We've got jets dogfighting in the mountains, possibly again the Tajikistan location being leaked as a location for Battlefield 6 on showcase here. And then we roll into shots of a tank destroying buildings in what looks like the Cairo location. Now, based on a couple of posts on Twitter, this tank right here could well be the CV-90, a Swedish vehicle. No mention of which side of the conflict this vehicle could be on at the stage, but it's certainly applying some destructive damage. Next, there's a small clip of a nighttime mission being played out, with soldiers lifting up one of their own over a high wall. There is some Arabic language on the wall here, which again leads me to think that we're still in Cairo right now. And I've got to admit, there's a certain Clean House MW19 vibe coming from this, but we'll get back to that because the trailer then jumps all the way back to Brooklyn again, and we get a shot of the famous Jane's Carousel in Dumbo. We've all heard the multiplayer leaks about this location, I'm sure. Here we get a wide shot of an aircraft about to deploy countless soldiers into battle via a parachute jump. They've all got oxygen masks on, so they're definitely coming from extreme height. And then we quickly fly to a river winding through dry hills. And again, this could be the Tajikistan location that's been rumored. And then we go on to tanks rolling through the outskirts of Cairo. You can see the pyramids in the background. And this clip here, it just gives me major vibes of Battlefield 3's Thunder Run mission from the campaign. And I've got to say, the presentation of Battlefield 6 so far, including the logo for the game that we get to see at the end of the trailer, it all just screams Battlefield 3, and we know that the devs identified Battlefield 3 as an inspiration for this game a long time ago, and you can really feel that in the trailer. It's just this time we don't have that blue filter that was all over the top of it. Then there's a tiny clip of soldiers running through trenches. Not sure if we'll actually see trench warfare in Battlefield 6, but again, you never know. And another helicopter crashing into a building right in front of them. There definitely is a theme here. Next, we get a more detailed look at what I presume is one of the main characters in the single-player story. You can see severe burn marks on his hand operating the radio. This clip here is the clean house fire that I was mentioning. You get full use of night vision in what appears to be some sort of raid. From what we can see in the background, I think this is still Cairo, and it will probably be a later part of the mission from the soldiers earlier that were giving their friend a leg up over the wall. Next, we get to see more destruction, this time of a dam, and some of you might recognize this because there was some leaked gameplay that ended up on social media. It was in a much more unfinished state when it released back then to what we're seeing right now. But this is the moment in the trailer where the Battlefield theme kicks in, and I've got to say, it gives me goosebumps every single time. This shot here takes us back to Cairo with the backdrop of the pyramids, and we'd see the battle over the shoulder of a gunner on the side of a Black Hawk helicopter, and that's strafing along the side of unfinished buildings. However, I think you can guess what's coming. Another crashing heli. This time, a soldier on the ground whips out an AT-4 launcher and takes down the chopper, sending it careering through the building, out the other side and into another building with plenty of destruction on display. There's a little bit of a similarity here to the Battlefield 4 mission Fishing in Baku. That was the first gameplay we got to see of Battlefield 4 all the way back in 2013 now. It's kind of crazy to think it was that long ago. And I think we got 17 minutes of gameplay back then. We weren't so lucky this time around with Battlefield 6. Then we move on to the assault on Gibraltar. Countless amphibious attack vehicles rolling out from the aircraft carrier, which is stationed just off the coast, and here you get a great view of the landing with the huge rock on the left-hand side and the air traffic control tower for the airport over on the right. We've got Amtrak vehicles bobbing through the water heading towards the shore, and then we quickly cut to the shore itself. Hundreds of infantry soldiers running up the beach through those hedgehog emplacements, and it's giving off, I gotta say, major D-Day vibes, and you wouldn't be surprised if this is some sort of way to include that feeling in a modern setting from the developers. Then we flip back again to what I think is the Tajikistan location. Soldiers on ATVs are rolling through those dry hills down into the Green Valley and the river below. Very cool looking location, I do have to say. And then we cut to our favorite ghillie-adorned soldier, this time smacking his adversary with a sledgehammer. All that cool weaponry you could use, and a sledgehammer is still the most efficient thing. Notice the soldier that he bludgeons, however, appears to be wearing the same helmet as that Pax Armata soldier from the previous scene in the trailer. I think this all but confirms that our ghillie soldier friend here is on the side of NATO. The trailer then takes us back to New York, showcasing the attack on Manhattan Bridge, F-16s flying past the Statue of Liberty and a little bird chopper traveling along the length of the bridge when the missile connects and splits the bridge in half. The destruction on display here again gives me those Levolution vibes, set-piece destruction, as opposed to properly player-controlled stuff. But regardless, in a single-player campaign, these moments have their home. Okay, this guy is important. We've already seen one main character, the bearded warrior with the burnt hands. Well, now it appears we have his opposite, the antagonist, the bad guy. And notice how he's also scarred from burns on his face. Yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm guessing our two main characters have a bit of history, potentially even some shared trauma based on those burns. We're moving into the closing stages of the trailer now. The action really picks up. This shot here is an Su-57 fighter jet coming out of a strafe on an airbase below, potentially the NATO airbase in Georgia that was mentioned in the first teaser. The jet gets extremely close to another helicopter, almost taking our crash chopper count to obscene levels, but thankfully it misses. Then we move on to Abrams tanks smashing through buildings in Cairo. We're racing trains in New York. And I've got to say, that's the same style of train car that we saw falling off the Manhattan Bridge when it was struck by those missiles. I don't think we're too far off slotting an Operation Metro style map into these train tunnels. You know DICE will be working on something like that for this game. The parachuting soldiers that we saw in the aircraft earlier on, they appear again here, this time mid-jump, down onto the Rock of Gibraltar, presumably as part of the attacking Pax Armata forces. Then an Su-57 smashes an F-16 out of existence, and we get a closer look at the opposite number to the buzz-cut ghillie. We've got Pax Armata ghillie right here. He's holding an M18 pistol, and he's taking part in some sort of conversation or maybe a standoff between multiple soldiers here. They're all pointing their weapons at each other. And then we cut 2 soldiers busting down a door in Cairo. The guy kicking the door in, he's holding an M1014 shotgun. Then we return to Gibraltar again to see a showcase of destruction, and Eagle Eye fans might actually remember this from a tech preview that DICE and EA released all the way back in 2020, before even Battlefield 2042 was revealed. This level of detail in the destruction has clearly been a focus for Battlefield for some time, and it appears now finally we're going to get to see the results of that in Battlefield 6. Battlefield 2042 barely had any destruction whatsoever. The very last shot of the trailer shows off the Tajikistan location again, I think, snowy mountains in the background with the soldier in the foreground gesturing forwards towards the buildings. Now I think it's an HK416 in the soldier's hands, although now looking at it, that smaller magazine means it could well be a different caliber of round, so maybe it's the HK417 instead. Gun buffs in the comments, you can correct me on that one. And that's it, the first Battlefield 6 trailer broken down for you, and hopefully I've helped highlight some stuff that you might have missed. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and tell the almighty algorithm that I'm back making